What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to take this two-part Gerard Enterprise pig mask and turn it into this early self-titled going into mid self-titled Paul Gray pig mask. First we're going to go over a few materials you're going to need for this guy, and then we're going to go ahead and get it painted. So let's jump into it now. Alright guys, here's a few materials that you're going to need. First thing being this two-part Gerard Enterprise pig mask. You can get them directly from him. Just shoot him an email or call his shop and he should be able to get you sorted out with one. These are from the same molds that Paul got his mask from. So it's the best thing out there you can get for this process. Next thing you're going to need is just a few tools. Here we just have your regular leather working tools. We have a leather punch, a couple different pairs of scissors, one for your leather, one for cutting your latex. You have an X-Acto knife for making some of your smaller cuts. You also need a few setting tools. I have these hand setters as well as my press. You're going to need a couple of 3/4 inch buckles, some medium-sized rivets, some snaps. I get my snaps from the fabric section of Hobby Lobby, but you can definitely order them anywhere online. I have these eyelets, a 2-inch O-ring, and some various sizes of leather, 3/4, 1 inch, and 1/2 inch. Now, as for paint for this project, you're going to need a variation of orange as well as a tan. This is what I use. My tan color is khaki, and this particular orange is bright orange, but you don't need these exact two, but you're going to need some variation of either, as well as some red for the tongue. And then if you don't have a latex-based paint, just use some mask-making latex and some distilled water 1:1. Now, a tool you don't need but I find highly useful is going to be a Dremel with a felt tip or a sanding bit. Alright, so now that we've gone over that, let's go ahead and get these eyes trimmed and prepped for paint. So you want to go ahead and trim your mask all up to look like Paul's did around that time. You want to do the top part and the bottom part as well. And then to get the eyes trimmed, you just want to use your eyeliner pencil or a regular pencil, anything that won't stain the mask, and just use some reference and go ahead and trace the shape of your eyes. It's okay if the eyes aren't 100% correct, because whenever you go to do the folds with the leather, it's gonna pull up on the eyes a bit, like shown here. So just keep that in mind whenever you're making your eye cuts. Alright, so now that you have your eye cuts traced out, the next step is going to be to get them all cut out. So first we're going to start with our X-Acto knife and just kind of poke a hole right in a spot where we can get our scissors in there to start trimming, something like this. And then now go ahead and take your scissors for trimming your latex and just go ahead and trace around the eye cut. It's okay if you don't get it super smooth right away. I'm going to show you how to fix that here in a bit, but you're going to want to cut your outlines out like this. Make sure you take your time with this process as to not overcut anything. It's okay to make them a little bit smaller because we can always fix that later. Alright, so now that you have both eyes cut out, I'm going to show you how to take your sanding bit on your Dremel and just kind of smooth it down. Notice I cut mine a little bit smaller than the outline because I wanted to leave room to make them nice and smooth and look as close to Paul's mask as possible. So take your sanding bit or a felt bit, whatever you really have, and just kind of follow the outline of the eyes and cut down any of those jagged scissor marks. You can also do this with a sharp pair of scissors. If you don't have a Dremel, just flip the mask inside out and cut down all of those lines from the back, and it'll give you a smooth cut. I'll show you how to do that here in just a second. Alright, so at this stage we're pretty much just putting the final touches on the eye cuts here, getting everything smoothened and shaped out like you want it. So here I'm just kind of cleaning everything up a little bit with the bit on the Dremel, and then I'm just going to take my scissors and kind of clean up all these little latex bits. Like I mentioned before, the easiest thing to do is to flip your mask inside out and go ahead and trim it this way, because that'll leave a cleaner cut on the outside. So once we're done with all of this, your mask should look something like this, and now we can go ahead and move on to paint. So before I go ahead and paint these, I like to go ahead and pin the top half and the bottom half to a head separately, simply just because you want to make sure to get paint all over the mask, even in areas where it's not going to be seen, because once you start trimming certain things off, you don't want any of that exposed raw latex. Now, to go ahead and mix your paint, I like to start with the orange as the base. Paul's mask had a very slight tinge of orange to it, but it was very paled out. And that's essentially what we're doing with this flesh tone base, is we're pouring just a little bit at a time to try to get it to that pale orange color we need. You'll see here that I got a decent mix at first, but I keep adding a little bit more tan here and there just to get it to the color that we need. Now keep in mind, it's okay if you add a little bit too much of that flesh base, because you can always readjust it with more orange as needed. I would say by the end of this process, I probably went about 1 part orange to about 2 parts of that flesh color, something along those lines. You can see on the side of the cup here that as I add more of that pale flesh color, that the orange starts to pale out and becomes way less bright. So for this project, we're just going to hand paint it with a chip brush. So I grab a new chip brush and I pull out some of those excess bristles, just so it doesn't get stuck in the paint. So I just go ahead and dip it in the paint, wipe a little bit of excess off, and then I just go ahead and brush it on. You don't want to just use a regular brushing technique. You kind of want to brush and dab it at the same time to eliminate as many brush strokes as possible and get as smooth and clean of a finish as you can. This guy's going to take a couple of layers just to make sure none of that raw latex is exposed underneath. So go ahead and get your first layer on, see what it looks like, and add another one if need be. So now that your first layer of paint is all on there and dried, just go on with a second layer to potentially cover any thin spots that there might be. And like I mentioned before, go in with this dabbing motion. That way you can eliminate any potential brush strokes that you may have had on the first layer and to help prevent them on the second layer as well. So go ahead and get this painted, and then we'll be able to move on to the next step. Now once your mask is fully painted, it should look something like this. So before we move on to the straps, we're going to go ahead and paint the tongue. So just take some of that red acrylic I mentioned earlier and a small brush, and just go ahead and get the tongue painted. Now that your mask is fully painted, it should look something like this, so go ahead and let it fully dry and we can move on to the straps. So what I like to do before I get into the full strapping process is I like to go ahead and get my snap fasteners on that 1-inch strap that's going to go around the head. So go ahead and pre-measure yours out by either holding the mask up to your head or putting it on a mannequin head and measuring it out, and make sure that when it's worn, the left side overlaps the right. So what I like to do next is I like to go ahead and punch out the first hole for the first snap, insert the little button, and then I'll measure the other two by just lining it up, making a little indent in the leather, and then punching those out. Now once you have all three of them measured out, then what I go ahead and do is I just go ahead and overlap it with the other side. That way the receiving end of the snap fasteners can line up properly with the button sides. So just go ahead, get your measurements exactly where you want them. Notice here I had to remeasure, but that's okay. Those little indents will get covered by the fasteners. So now let me go ahead and show you how to get those added. So for the button side, I go ahead and put all three of the buttons back in, and then I take my setter, make sure it's on the side that fits the button, perfectly in there, and then I take the receiving end of that, put it in, take the hand setter, and similar to how I showed you how to set eyelets in the Jester videos, go ahead and make sure your hand setter is straight up and down, and just tap it with your hammer, something like this, and it should look like this. So just go ahead and repeat that process with the other two. Once you have all three of them in there, it should look something like this, and we're going to do the same with the receiving end of the snaps. Only these will go in from the bottom like shown here, and the top part of it will go on the front of the leather like this. Make sure you punch out any excess leather you need to make sure everything fits in nice and snug, but don't punch it too big, as you can have issues with the hardware potentially falling out. So Just like with the top part, I like to go ahead and get all three of the posts in, and then I go ahead and take the other part, line it up, and set it just like this. So go ahead and get all of those in there, and we can move on to the next step. Alright, so before we continue with the strapping process, let's go ahead and get the top part and the bottom part attached to make the rest of this process a little bit easier. So first thing I like to do is I like to trim off these little curved bits and make everything straight. That way the bottom jaw can sit exactly how it did on Paul's mask without any excess getting in the way. So go ahead and trim those up just a bit, and about here's where I like it. And one thing about the jaw on Paul's mask is it wasn't completely straight. It was a little bit crooked, so just use a little bit of reference. Get the jaw to sit exactly how you see is correct. About here is where I like it. Easiest measurement is from the cheek down to this little 3/4 inch strap here. This strap had 3 rivets on it, so I'll normally line it up, measure all 3 rivets, and then just go ahead and cut it to size like so. Once you have it measured out and cut to size, go ahead and repeat this process again because you're going to need one for each side. Now once you have everything trimmed up and measured to size, go ahead and line your mask up again and get these little pieces attached. If you have some sort of pins or clamps or anything like that to hold it down, that would definitely be ideal. I did not in this situation. They're not necessary, but they definitely do help. So just go ahead and punch your 3 holes, get your rivets in there, and then repeat the process on the other side. Alright, now that you have the bottom jaw added, I like to go in and just kind of clean these flaps up on the inside a little bit, get those trimmed down. It's not a necessary step, I just like to kind of clean up the cast as I go just to make it easier for me down the line. So once we're done with this part, we're going to go ahead and get that forehead strap added. Alright guys, to do the forehead strap, I typically will go ahead and just kind of do a little mock-up on the mask like this, just to see roughly where it's going to sit. And then I'll go ahead and take my mask and throw it on ahead just to make sure everything lines up perfectly. You'll see here I kind of pin the mask to the head just a little bit just to help make sure I get everything lined up properly. Once I'm happy with how it lines up, you'll see that that strap indeed does overlap left to right when looking at it from the back. you want to go ahead and line it up. And we're going to do that middle rivet first, just to make sure that we can get it held on properly to do those forehead folds. So once you have that lined up properly, go ahead and make a little mark and punch that out. Once you have it punched out, I like to go ahead and line it back up with the mask just to make sure it sits where you want it to, and then go ahead and take your eyeliner pencil and make a little marking on the mask. That way you know exactly where that hole is going to be at. Then I just go ahead and unpin it from the head, punch it out on the mask, and get that forehead strap put in there. So now we can move on to the folds. Alright, so now that your forehead strap is in, this is where we're going to start doing those folds. The best way to explain the way I like to do it is I pull up on the mask a little bit while holding the strap in place. Notice that whenever I do that and I sort of pinch it to shape it the way it needs to be, it gets that fold like shown here. So I'll pin it down on the one side, and then I'll repeat that process to the other side until I get that shape in the forehead that I'm happy with. Something like this. Now, once you have that, we're going to go ahead and punch out the outer rivet holes before we do the straps that go on the folds. So notice how I just kind of sit here and mess with it until I'm happy with it. And then once I'm happy with it, that's when I'm going to go ahead and punch out the rivets like shown here. So I just make a little mark with the back of a rivet, punch it out, put it in, and bam, and then repeat that on this side as well until it looks something like this. Once it's at this stage, you can see here I kind of pinch these little folds to show you that the strap that's going to sit here is going to cause it to make that distortion. So I just kind of pin those folds, and then I pre-cut my straps for the O-ring shown here. And I'm going to go ahead and get it attached to the O-ring first, and then we're going to go ahead and attach these to the mask. All I do to attach these to the mask is I just fold the leather over where I'm going to want it to go into the O-ring like shown here. I sort of measure out where I want the O-ring to sit. The O-ring should sit at the top of your head, and once I get them equally measured out, I go ahead and get them attached to the O-ring. Strap made with the O-ring, all you're going to do is just remove one clamp at a time, measure out roughly where that strap is going to be. I leave a little bit overhang at the bottom so I can trim it up after, then mark it with the backs of your rivets and just go ahead and punch those holes out here. Then we're going to line it back up and we're going to make little marks and punch it out in the mask. One thing I am going to mention here that I end up doing later in the video, but don't believe I show that I did it, is that I go ahead and replace these medium stem rivets with some longer stem rivets, because you'll see here in a bit when I go to work on the other straps, these medium stem rivets just keep causing these straps to pop off. So make sure you pick yourself up some long stem rivets as well, just in case. Once you get these added to this side, go ahead and get them added to the other side, and then we can move on to the next step of the strapping process. Alright, now that you have the forehead straps added and trimmed, it should look something like this. Now let's go ahead and move on to getting those buckles added. Alright guys, to go ahead and make your buckles, you want to go ahead and just fold a little piece of leather at the end, punch a few holes, slide your leather through your buckle, go ahead and get your eyelet added and get it set. Once you have your buckle set, it should look something like this. I just trim off a little bit of excess on the bottom, and then I go ahead and measure it out before making the other one. Now you want your buckles around an inch away from your snap rivet, and once you have it measured out, go ahead and make a second one, and we're going to go ahead and get them attached to the mask. So just like this, line it up at a slight inward angle. Get your rivets in there, get it set, and go ahead and repeat this process on the other side. Alright, now that you're finished with that buckle, we can go ahead and do the receiving end to these straps. So all I do is I just loop the leather through the O-ring, attach it here, and then go ahead and loop it through the buckle. And my first point is about 3/4 inch away from the rivet, and then it's about an inch down from that one, as you'll see shown here. So do it on the one side and then repeat the process on the other side, and then your mask should be looking something like this. Alright, now that your buckles are done, we're just going to go ahead and add the piece that goes from the bottom jaw to the forehead strap. So all you do here is just punch out a hole, and then this is where those long stem rivets come into play, as shown here. They're a little bit longer. You ideally want something like this if you're putting it through multiple layers of leather as well as a mask. So just attach it with one rivet there and just measure it right about here. You want it to sit right close to the buckle, and you ideally want it to loop behind your ear if you're using your own head as a measurement for something like this. So once you get it lined up the best you can, go ahead and punch 2 rivet holes in that back strap, and then repeat the process on the other side. Once you do that, your mask should look something like this. Let's go ahead and get all the rivets set, and then we can go ahead and add the eyelets. So for the eyelets, we do it the same way we did it in the Jester video. I use my tool here that I made, which has eyelets just measured about an inch apart. You just want to go ahead and punch your holes out, add your eyelets, and set them with the hand setter. Now that all your hardware is done, all that's left is a few small details as well as some weathering. So first we're going to do those little details, one being a small rip in the side of the mask as shown here. This is back when Paul had his mask taped around the side. When he removed the tape, it sort of ripped the mask, so we're just going to simulate that here. All I did was just draw the little line as seen in some photos, cut it out, blend in the little pencil line, and then I just take a little piece of tape and go ahead and back the mask. You can use duct tape. I used electrical tape. It's all I had. So once you do that, it should look something like this. Now, since this is a early self-titled transitioning into mid self-titled, because Paul's mask used to have that behind the ear strap attached below this little 3/4 piece, we have to punch out a couple of little rivet holes that would be shown on his mask as well. So it should look something like this. Okay, so if you wanted something leaning a little bit more early self-titled, you're more than welcome to leave your mask like this and consider it finished. However, we're going to weather it up just a little bit just to kind of darken some of these deep areas and overall darken the mask. So I'm using my Surgery Sienna by Tim Gore Bloodline, just putting a little bit in the cup, and then I'm heavily diluting it, as you can see here. We're going to do this weathering in a couple of different stages. We're going to do some washes like shown here, where we're just going to take the watered down paint, we're going to brush it all on, and then we're just going to dab it off. Once we do a couple washes of the Surgery Sienna and we're happy with how it looks, I'm going to take my Bloodlines Decay, which is just a nice nasty brown color, and I'm going to get it into some of these deeper areas like shown here, as well as do a little overall wash over the mask just to kind of darken it up a tad into all those other nice details that's on this mold. After a couple light washes, your mask should look something like this. However, we're going to go a little bit darker using a couple more layers of washes as well as the airbrush. The airbrush isn't completely necessary. You can achieve the look you're going for with just washes. So here I'm just taking a little bit more of that Decay watered down on a brush and just kind of brushing it all over, dabbing it off, brush it all over, dab it off, and just kind of repeat the process until you're happy with the color that you have. I ended up mixing a little bit of Surgery Sienna in with the Decay just to give it a nice like burnt orange look, something that Paul's mask would eventually transition to the later into the self-titled cycle that they go. Alright, so now that we've wiped off a lot of that excess brown, we're going to go ahead and airbrush some of that burnt orange color on top to go ahead and achieve that look we're trying to get for that transition between early self-titled and mid self-titled. So go ahead and layer your colors on until you get that nice burnt orange color that you're happy with. One thing to note here is I'm not airbrushing any of these colors super evenly on the mask. I'm leaving some areas a little lighter and I'm making some areas a bit darker. You want to just use your reference for that, but overall this is the look that you're trying to achieve. Alright, now we're just going to take a little bit of Flex Gloss in the airbrush just to seal in all of that extra weathering. Alright guys, and just like that, your Paul Gray Pig mask is now finished. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments below. If you like what you saw, consider leaving me a like, and if you haven't already subscribed, we're trying to pump out new content weekly. Make sure you stay tuned to the end of the video where I have some better shots of this thing. And yeah, that's going to be it for this video, guys. I will catch you guys in the next one. Later, y'all.